Hello friends, Glage back with another Punishing Gray Raven video today, and since we are coming up on the end of the Global Synchronization program, I want to take a little bit and take a look back at where we went with this thing, what happened, and what's coming in terms of just how wild it has been to be a PGR player in 2025. So, going to look back on some things that happened and what we've been able to accomplish over these past 10, 11 months, and just kind of put it all in perspective and give my overall thoughts on how this very, very daunting project has gone for both Kuro games themselves and for us as players out there. So, the global synchronization started basically right at the beginning of this year, almost during New Year's of 2025, and it will, of course, end with the conclusion of our current patch, which is scheduled to end on November 12th, 2025. So, in just over 11 months by the time this patch ends, I wanted to go over a list of a lot of the notable things that have happened in PGR over that total 11 months and what we've blasted through in terms of content in that amount of time. So, here's some numbers for you. In the totality of that 11-month global synchronization time, we will have gone through 18 total patches, 13 of them being new S rank construct patches, 5 of them being new A rank construct patches. We went through 6 different character leaps. Watanabe got a character leap. Liv Imperia got her character leap. Corinna Nashir got her character leap. Bianca Stigmata got her character leap. Crimson Weave got her character leap. And Alyssa Echo also got a character leap just during the global synchronization program itself. We went through 50 new codings, of which 5 were gacha paid codings, similar to the one we have with Selena right this moment. 29 new codings that had to be purchased with rainbow cards, aka IRL money, and 19 freebies during those 11 months of the global synchronization. But it wasn't just the number of new things that were introduced in terms of characters and character skins and character updates and all that. No, there's a whole lot of major things that were introduced and implemented into Punishing Gray Raven during the course of the global synchronization program. For example, prior to the global synchronization program, we did not have the Nihil element. We now have that. We now have 2/3 of a Nihil team. We did not have the intensive battle in Phantom Pain Cage. This was implemented during the global synchronization program. We did not have the updated weapon banner system, where now if you whiff on the 80% rate up for a banner, you are guaranteed to get it on the next pull. That did not exist prior to the global synchronization. We got the entire 3rd generation of constructs being added in, which is a major milestone both in terms of how characters are designed and how they're played in the various game modes. We got the introduction of elemental effect content. Believe it or not, none of this was implemented in the game yet prior to the global synchronization. And we're now at a point where we have 4 active elemental effects regularly seeing content in weekly modes, and we're about to have a 5th here soon with Darkflow getting a full team in the very near future. We also had the introduction of 2 entirely new alternate game modes. Awakening Tundra and the Godfall Revelation were both introduced during the Global Sync. We got our very first A rank to have time stop on an ultimate, that being Discord, with this current patch coming in. We got countless quality of life changes to the gameplay and the game client and everything in between during the course of the global synchronization. And somehow, during the entire duration of it, Corinna Nashir remained the dark tank for the entire goddamn thing. So, just as a little reminder of things that have changed drastically and some of them that have not changed at all. To kind of give you a time frame, to give you a concept of what we've done on Punishing Gray Raven for the global synchronization in the 11 months it will have existed. Prior to this program, prior to getting double and triple patches and the plan to catch up the entirety of the world to the Chinese server in a single year, you could see that the average S rank patch would average somewhere between 40 to 45 days, and the average A rank patch would be somewhere between 30 and 35 days, give or take. There are exceptions both ways, but in general, that's kind of the average you would see for the length of a single patch with a new character. So, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say that A rank patches average around 4.5 weeks, and S rank patches average around 6 weeks. If you kind of throw them all into a blender and do the numbers up, that's about where they fall out. And by that math, if I'm doing this correctly, and it shouldn't be too hard, just simple addition, but by my math, we will have gone through right around 100.5 weeks of PGR content in just under 45 weeks real time. So literally over double the amount of content for 11 months. All at once. We went through literally over twice the amount of content we normally would have in an 11-month span, which is honestly incredibly wild when you sit and think about it for any amount of time. To give you a better idea of how much time compression really has happened, the last character to be released prior to the start of the Global Sync was Chu Shukra. Now, for us in the global server, Chu is not even a year old. She came out last December of 2024. So she's not even a year old in terms of being available to play in the game for us global players. Chu's original release date on the Chinese server was in late 2023. This character is almost 2 full years old in terms of PGR's actual time frame. So if that helps kind of summarize just how much we compressed into this tight 11-month window, that should hopefully kind of set you up, considering this was the very last character we had in a non-global sync patch at the end of 2024. So I just want to take a little bit of time to kind of look back and speak on what I thought went well with the global synchronization, what maybe didn't go quite so well, and more importantly, what we can kind of expect going forward, especially for those of you who are newer players and you've only played in a PGR world where the global synchronization is going on, where you're getting double and triple patches all the time. So I thought it would be a good time and fun to just kind of sit and look at this whole thing writ large and kind of take a look and guess how it's going to affect people as we go forward. Because a lot of you have never played PGR in a normal schedule. A lot of you have never experienced single PGR patches, aside from the Devil May Cry collab patch, but that's obviously its own unique thing in its own right. So, yeah, let's talk about this for a second. Let's go over some various aspects of the global sync and how they affected me personally, and then the game and the community writ large as well. So, I want to start with the stuff that I think weren't the best aspects of the global sync, the stuff that maybe didn't feel the greatest or had some slightly negative impact on, specific aspects of the player base or the game itself. And then we'll get to the stuff that I think was a massive success and all that, because I think it makes more sense to save the good stuff for later. And to be fair, I don't have a lot of negative criticism, so this is not going to be a super long section. But nonetheless, the first and foremost thing that was probably the single biggest downside to the global synchronization program was crunch. The crunch, and more crunch, especially if you are a content creator like myself. But even if all you are is a casual player of the game, you still got an absurd amount of content foisted upon you in a short window. Like I said, for 11 months straight, we did over double the content we would have normally done in that time window. That's a lot. That is a ton of things to do, to accomplish, to check off the list in a very short amount of time when you get down to it, From a player perspective, that was a lot to keep track of, right? PGR is a gacha game, and in general, especially for a gacha game, I think PGR is mostly pretty respectful of your time as a human being. Prior to the global sync, PGR is not a game that demanded you log in every single day and spend an hour or 2 hours doing things to make sure that you're caught up and keeping up with all the event modes and the weekly and daily things that they expect you to do to be rewarded and get your free rainbow cards, or not free rainbow cards, free black cards, free orange cards, all that good stuff that we get for doing game modes. And in general, I think PGR is quite respectful about that and doesn't demand too much of your personal time. But during the global sync, that wasn't always true, obviously. When we're getting triple patches handed to us, that is literally 3 times the amount of things to do on a daily basis for usually at least 7+ weeks. And that's not an insignificant amount of time to go, hey, you've got 3 times the amount of stuff to do on a given day. It's not always like that because weekly and daily modes didn't really change. Your daily missions didn't change, they just gave extra rewards depending on the size of the patch. The weekly modes didn't change in the amount of time you had to get them done, you just got double and triple the rewards. So that part didn't really experience any major crunch. But in terms of like extra event modes, time limited event modes, time limited banners, time limited gacha codings, all that stuff, there was a lot more of it coming all at once. And I think they found some pretty elegant solutions, especially with the gacha codings, by extending how long you could roll on those. So that I actually see as a positive. But in general, this was crunch time for everyone, for the player base, for Kuro themselves in terms of getting the patches out. For content creators, it was the biggest crunch that you could have asked for. And frankly, nobody's asking for crunch, but, you know, sometimes it is what it is. From a content creator's perspective, let me tell you, I've been running on an empty gas tank for a hot minute here. We went through an absurd amount of content in a very short amount of time, like I said. And this meant that since the beginning of this year, since 2025 started, I have done 13 individual character guides, soon to be 14, because we know Live is going to release in the next patch that comes in November. So that's going to be 14 brand new character guides in just over 11 months. And to put it simply, that's bonkers. That's crazy talk. It's actually nutty. Considering when PGR is on a normal schedule like we will be in 2026, it's likely that I will have to do maybe 8 character guides over the course of the entire year of 2026. And that's a maybe. Even if all I did was make character guides, if that's the only thing I did for the Global Synchronization program, the only thing I did for my content creation and all I put out, that still would have been an assload of work in a short amount of time. 14 character guides is a lot. There's so much more to talk about than just character guides. There's been so many things to talk about with the influx of new players who are looking for information on stuff beyond how do I play character X, Y, or Z. People who want to know how they should save their pull resources, how they can maximize their pull resources, what things are worth spending real life money on if you decide you want to put a little bit of your hard-earned cash into the game, what to talk about in terms of new events, new patches, new everything. And in the middle of all that, we had the biggest collaboration this game has ever had, and one of the most anticipated collaborations Kuro Games has ever taken part in with the DMC collab. And that alone warranted multiple videos of just focusing on what was going to be coming with the DMC collab and how to best prepare for it before we even talk about those marathon full feature films I made for the characters once the game actually came out. So, you know, again, even if all I did was make character guides, there was so much going on. There's so much to do as a content creator. I've gotten a lot better in the process of how I make a guide. I'm much more efficient in the ways I can script, and my editing has gotten a lot smoother in terms of finding little shortcuts and way to do the edits how I like to do them for the guide. Again, I am not a professional editor. I'm not even an amateur editor. I am just some guy on the internet faking it to try and make guides at least look somewhat cohesive when people watch them. But even with me getting better at making guides and being more efficient, I would be lying through my teeth if I said doing it that many times over the course of 11 months didn't make me feel like I was trying to swim through a pool of drying concrete to get them all finished and edited and out in reasonable amounts of time. Because obviously, the longer you wait to get a character guide out, the less people start to care because they've already watched other guides or they've already researched the character on the Chinese server or this, that, and the other thing. So the aspect of what I had to do to keep up with the content in terms of just doing it and doing my dailies and doing my stuff, so I'm getting, in-game rewards so I can roll on characters. The amount of content I both wanted and sort of needed to make to keep up with the content creator program's reward system and to, just get my own stuff out that I wanted to do, because what's the point in making content if you don't actually want to make the content? It was a lot. This has been a very, very long road, despite it being, a little over 11 months when it's all said and done. And I can't lie to you, it's been exhausting. These last few months, especially since I got back from Evo, have been extra exhausting because it just doesn't feel like I've actually gotten a real break. And again, this isn't my job. You guys know well now that I don't do YouTube for a living. I do make a tiny pittance of money off YouTube, and I do mean the tiniest of pittances. And I do make enough money from the content creator program that I can put it back into PGR and play at the level I want. But it's not my job. This is not how I pay my bills, quote unquote. It might become that way because of how stuff is going with streaming in the economy, but that's a conversation for later. But anyway, in conjunction with all the crunch of that stuff, of trying to be a content creator, of trying to keep up with the game modes and keep up with the events and all that fun stuff, there was the crunch of being a spender in PGR during the global synchronization. Now, I'm not going to consider the aspect of being a actual spender in PGR during this program as a net negative, because I do think Kuro did a really reasonable job supplementing the dilemmas of being a spender by having stuff like Fresh Dawning be a regular thing every other patch, or every single patch. Having stuff like Rippling Dreams giving you some rewards and some quote-unquote money back for spending rainbow cards during the global synchronization patch. I think there are things that Kuro did to try and mitigate the difficulty of saying, hey, you are going to get over 2 times the content in less than a year, which means you have to spend over 2 times the amount in that same time frame to keep up with whatever your desired, rates are. If you are like me and you want to take every new S rank to triple S because that's just what you want to do, that now means you're doing twice as much in terms of your own wallet to make that happen throughout the entirety of this program. And that's a lot. That's asking someone to take their gacha budget and double it for almost an entire year is not a small ask, even if your gacha budget is, I'm willing to spend, $5 on the battle pass each patch, or I'm willing to have, say, one of the monthly subscription style things active. Maybe you have the monthly pass A active. Like, even if that's all you spend and you're only spending $5 to $7 a month, or even $5 to $7 a patch on PGR, doubling that still can very well be a lot for a lot of people, especially in a time we live in now where the economy is just absolutely in shambles. So, and the more you spend, the more of a whale you are, the more that hurts. Like, if you spend $5 a month or $5 a patch on PGR over the course of 11 months, okay, that's $55. Now we're asking you to spend over $100. That's not nothing. That is still a notable amount. But at the end of the day, the difference between 55 and, let's say, 110 is not going to be nearly as much if you're a big whale and you're spending, let's say, $50 or $80 or even $100 a month on PGR, because there are people that do that. Now you're talking about going from spending, let's say, $800 to $1,000 over the course of the year on PGR, which is a shitload of money. Don't get it twisted. But imagine if now suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, you want to keep up at that rate? Now you're looking at spending $2,000, $2,400. That is massive. That is a gigantic ask of your player base that is playing a game that they can, in fact, play 100% completely for free if they choose to. That is a thing you can do just fine. So the sheer amount of extra strain that was added into the crunch of this being so many new S ranks in such a short amount of time is a big ask. And it certainly is a big ask in the middle of an economy that's so heavily in shambles. And I know for a lot of people that might watch this, they might think, well, it's whales, the whatever, man. And like, I get it. I get that whale is often a term that comes with some derogatory branded attached to it, but it's very important to remember, whales fund this. Whales are who allow us to get all the new stuff, all the shiny things, and all the stuff that comes with playing Punishing Gray Raven and any gacha game for that matter. Without whales, these games don't maintain what they do. They would not be able to maintain, let alone grow and constantly receive improvements and upgrades and quality of life and new characters, new stories, new events. None of that's possible without whales. It just flat out isn't. And whether or not you think the system and the monetary design of gacha is a good or a bad thing is not a discussion I want to have here at this given moment, because one, it's a discussion that gets a lot of heated debate going on back and forth, and two, it's not really relevant to the topic I'm talking about here. So I get that is a discussion that comes with the game shouldn't be modeled after that monetary format in the first place, but that's not the point I'm trying to make here. I'm just trying to highlight that the Global Sync did put a pretty heavy strain on anyone willing to whip out their wallet and spend their actual hard-earned real-life money on Punishing Gray Raven. And even if you are a free-to-play player or a very light spender, you should still note that, and you should still keep in mind that you want people spending money on the game. People spending money on the game means the game doesn't falter, it doesn't stagnate, and we get to keep seeing this wonderful thing that we all care about expand, and that's a win for us all on the normal level. So, I think they did about as reasonable of a job as they could, knowing they had to cram this much content into a very short amount of time. And you can't exactly turn around and offer people massive discounts on the paid stuff, because if the Chinese players and the Taiwan players and people who were way further ahead see the global community getting to buy all this stuff that they had to pay full price for at a massive discount, that's not going to go well. That's just not going to be a happy situation for anyone involved. And so they kind of just had to take the bullet on this and go, hey, spenders, we know this is going to suck. Here's the best we can do with stuff like, again, the Fresh Dawning and the free orange cards for spending rainbow card system, but this is the best we can do. If you want stuff at the price that we've always said it's not going anywhere, and you have to buy more of it at once if you want to keep up. So it is what it is, and it's been a bit of a strain and a bit of a rough time, but we're also through it, and for the most part, I think it was done as well as we could have asked for reasonably without drastically pissing off a notable amount of the original player base. So, not the best part of the Global Sync by any aspect, but again, I don't think it's a thing that we have to look back on and go, man, this really did sink this entire plan, because it definitely didn't. The game has gained far more players than it lost, and there were definitely people who were big time spenders that said, nope, I'm not doing this, and bowed out before the Global Sync. But the influx of new players the Global Sync has brought in is easily going to outweigh what was lost in terms of that aspect of the game. In addition to all of that, the sheer glut of content we got meant that a lot of major changes and alterations that PGR got at the base level kind of just got lost in the shuffle and somewhat glossed over. We have gone in very short order of being in a world where we don't have elemental effects being used in the game or even implemented in the game prior to the global synchronization, to a world now where every single week there is at least one war zone that is going to have an elemental effect tied to it in the entropic section, and oftentimes there's one floating around somewhere in here too. That's a massive alteration to the game. That is a huge shakeup of PGR at its core, because now you have a system where you're not only learning new characters when they come out, but you're learning new rotations for existing characters. You're learning new skills for existing characters via the leap system. You're learning entirely new game mechanics in terms of how to use and proc the new elemental effects. That's a big difference. That is a huge leap forward for this game, and it's something that throughout the entirety of the Global Sync, we're just like, oh, right, elemental effects. Like, we went from literally having 0 to 4 of them being regular rotations in the pool. And here soon, it'll be 5, because once we get Liv's new frame in the next patch, we're going to have a completely finished Dark Flow team. Now, granted, we have a completely finished Dark Flow team now, but that involves Crimson Weave, who's literally getting replaced with the exact same element, role, and elemental effect, which I have thoughts about, but we'll worry about that another day. But nonetheless, that's just one example of major changes that PGR has had that just kind of happened, and we just kind of glossed over because it was all part of the Global Synchronization program. We've also had absolutely enormous amounts of story crammed into a very short window. And for you voracious readers out there who binge each chapter the second it comes out, this is honestly probably paradise for you. This is probably great. You're getting story content fast and furious. You're getting to experience new moments and new, major plot threads in very short order, which can be a positive if you absolutely feed on that and the wait for the next, big story beat is agonizing. But at the same time, it also kind of eliminates some of the pacing and design of certain chapters having cliffhangers, or certain chapters having major questions unanswered that you're meant to sit and kind of deal with for months until the main story picks back up. And granted, even when we had side chapters, A-rank chapters, or chapters that quote-unquote aren't main story, they still all intertwine into the main story. So there really wasn't a such thing as, this is an A-rank patch, which means it has no bearing on the overarching plot. But there were times where a major cliffhanger happened that was designed to make you sit and deal with that for 2, maybe even 3 patches before you got back to that portion of the story. And in this case, that might have been the next patch had the next main story update. And so there is some vice to virtue about whether or not that messed with the overall pacing of the story. But again, that's only if you are a die-hard, I read every chapter the moment it comes out kind of person. And for a lot of people, that means those of us like me who kind of read when we feel like it or when we get some free time have just gotten massively behind. I've mentioned multiple times at this point that I'm working on lore notes and a lore document so that I can incorporate lore videos and content onto this channel in the future. And it's very much something I want to make a big part of 2026. I want that to be a big part of my channel going forward, or at the very least, a consistent part of my channel going forward. But I still have so much to read and so much to catch up on. I want to have that done by the end of the year, but it's entirely possible, and at this point, probably even likely, that I'm not going to be caught up on the story by the time January 1st hits. In fairness, I am doing this in a very different way than most folks would experience the story, since I am sitting here and taking meticulous notes as I read every line of dialogue and every line of narration, studying minor details and all that stuff. But I still think it's worth noting that the sheer glut of story that has been dropped into our laps in 11 months is massive. That's a lot. And no matter how fast you read or what way you approach the PGR story, it's hard to argue that that isn't at least somewhat of a con in terms of the overall pacing and the overall way the story is presented. But again, one of those things that was inevitable and something that you just kind of have to accept was part of getting caught up with the Global Synchronization program. In terms of things I think didn't go great with the Global Synchronization program, that's really about it. In general, I think almost everything else in terms of how the Global Synchronization program was handled was done basically as well as we could have hoped for as the Punishing Grey Raven community, as the player base. 18 patches worth of content meant 18 patches worth of localization work, 18 patches implementing new game modes, new quality of life changes, and we even had an entire engine upgrade in the middle of the Global Synchronization program. And throughout all of that, throughout the entire process of this, we have actually had very, very few issues come up in terms of bugs, in terms of localization errors, or in terms of just general pitfalls that come with asking a dev and localization team to run on a highly accelerated schedule. That's not to say there were no bugs and no issues along the way, but honestly, no more than I would have really expected with any live service game. Gacha games are, built in a way where they are just constantly getting new code, new content, and everything stapled onto an already existing game. It's constantly additive. Very little, if anything, is ever subtracted from the base form of a gacha game once it gets successful and starts receiving regular updates. And for the localization team and the dev team to implement this much in this short amount of time, and for it to come with very minimal issues overall, I think deserves a lot of props and a lot of appreciation. Again, not going to sit here and try and tell you there were no bugs or there were no issues or there weren't some missed localization text here and there now and again. But again, not really any more than I would expect to see from PGR in a normal schedule. You're going to have bugs. You're going to have things that don't update properly. That's just going to happen. That is the nature of playing a live service game. And in terms of handling that well, I think they did immaculate. I think the sheer quality of how this much content got added in such a short amount of time without really breaking anything in the process deserves a notable round of applause. So that part was awesome because it had the potential to be a gigantically problematic pitfall for this entire project that Kuro started this year. For me, the single biggest W for the global synchronization, besides the obvious fact that we're all going to get the same content in the same time frame going forward, which again comes with its own set of, boons, the fact that we get to be hyped for new character reveals and that we all get to experience new content at the same time. There's much less effort you have to go through to dodge spoilers. There's going to be much more, community aspect on how new characters work, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But obviously, the fact that we're all synced up is the W. That is the win that was going through this massive amount of content so quickly. But the other massive W for the global synchronization writ large for me personally is how well it was set up for new and free-to-play players to get into PGR. Because if we're being honest about it, I think one of the biggest goals with the Global Synchronization program was enticing new players to check out PGR, was enticing players who've maybe had a little interest in the game or even who had never heard of the game into picking it up because, oh, this game is getting an accelerated schedule. It's got big things going on this year. Oh, it's got a Devil May Cry collab. Like, the global sync was clearly one piece of a larger puzzle designed to hopefully expand the global player base. And if you were a newer or a free-to-play player for the global synchronization, you have been living good. You have absolutely been eating super well for the entire duration of this thing. If you started playing PGR prior to the global synchronization, you know that getting a well-built account in this game is something that takes a lot of time, a assload of time to accomplish. PGR rarely has 100% rate up banners unless it's the newest characters, and in our case, sometimes multiple new characters due to the double and triple patches. And we also don't have very many ways to go pull old characters even at lower rate ups, because oftentimes you only have 3 characters on the 70% rate up banner. In fact, I think all the time it's only 3 characters on the 70% rate up banner. So even if you're willing to spend a boatload of cash to try and play catch up as a new player in this game, you're still going to have to take time to get there because there's just not a realistic way to pull old characters quickly. The Global Synchronization program has allowed a whole ton of new players to get multiple teams built up and set up in a fraction of the amount of real-world time thanks to the double and triple patches offering double and triple rewards. Even if you're a free-to-play player, you are literally getting double and triple the output in the same real-world time. Yes, it's all going to end up being the same amount you would have gotten if the patches were one by one, but the fact that you're cutting down 100.5 weeks of progress into 45, that's gigantic. That is a massive leap forward. That is basically a Game Genie code in terms of building up your account in compared to the real world time it would normally take. And I just realized I referenced Game Genie, and like 80% of the audience watching this is going to be like, what in the hell are you talking about? I'm old. What do you want from me? Back on topic. So the fact that free-to-play players have basically gotten to hit the hyperbolic time chamber in terms of leveling up their account power, from my angle, this has been executed basically as perfect as you could ask for. New players got hooked up. New players and free-to-play players absolutely positively got hooked up by the global synchronization. And no matter what negatives you might take away from this process personally, or what you think was a net negative for the game and the community writ large, nothing is going to outweigh the sheer W that newer and free-to-play players got for this game. And that's always a good thing. You want more new players in your gacha game. You want a bigger community. The bigger the community is, the more money gets spent on the game in the long run, the more it gets to grow, succeed, etc. This is not, revelatory information by any stretch of the imagination. But in the middle of all of that, we had, the hype, the announcement, and the release of the Devil May Cry collab. And even though that is now in the rear view, even though we have now gone all the way through the DMC collab and it is done and dusted, I'm still in awe of how well it was pulled off. Dante and Virgil fit perfectly in this game. The story was incredibly entertaining and even managed relevance into the overarching PGR plot. The care and detail that was put into that patch while the global sync was still going on is nothing short of a masterclass. The finer details, the careful touches, all the things that went into that collab while asking the dev team, the localization teams, to deal with this massively accelerated schedule. That's incredible. Like, it truly was just impressive in every way, shape, and form how well the DMC collab went, because a big collab comes with big expectations, and it would have been very easy for the DMC collab to faceplant. It would have been very easy for that thing to flub, have a mediocre story, have the characters not feel like you'd want them to feel in an action game, and just none of that happened. Absolutely none of that happened. It went off basically without a hitch. The only real things that went somewhat awry with DMC was, me personally, there was no test server because of licensing issues, which I was not remotely surprised about, and that is not at all Kuro's fault. It's just, this is what happens when you have to license IPs from other companies to do your collab. And the fact that it happened right as EVO was finishing up was, pretty much the worst possible timing for me as a content creator, but that's a me thing. That has nothing to do with the quality of the collab or how well it was presented and how well it was implemented. So despite the sheer amount of hype, despite the sheer amount of effort that went into making everyone know that this year was the year of DMC and PGR, that was going to be the focal point of 2025 for this game. And it was, and it succeeded with flying colors at it. It did everything I think any reasonable person could have asked for. I could go on for a while about all the positives that came out of this thing, but I do want to start looking ahead and talking about what's to come and what we can reasonably expect going forward. For one, if you've only played during the global synchronization, it's kind of hard to explain just how much more time you will have for multiple things in punishing Grey Raven. The most important of these being your ability to save for new characters. And that doesn't just mean new S ranks, but characters that are going to get leaps and added to the voucher shop. Characters that might come down the pipe as part of the Dorm Commission system, where we get a free copy by using the Dorm Commission currency. And just in general, especially for spenders, knowing we'll be back in a world where at least 3 or 4 patches a year won't have a paid S rank in them, that's going to be a welcome relief and a welcome chance to breathe again. Just way less to try and deal with in a way shorter time frame. Obviously, daily and weekly modes aren't going to change, and the amount of rewards we get for all the various game modes are going to feel, quote unquote, much smaller after living in a world where we've had multiple triple patches and you're getting handed triple the daily, weekly, and event rewards all at once. But I think those of you that are going to be new to the traditional PGR schedule will find it very chill, very low stress. And in terms of getting all the rewards and all the stuff you want to do in a given patch, you're going to feel much less pressed and much less like, oh man, I need to do this because this is one of the few days I have free time to work on event mode X, Y, and Z. I think that's going to be a little jarring at first with, again, the lower rewards, but trust me, not having to go through three patches at a time is going to be a net positive in the long run. It will take a little adjusting to, but I think it'll just be an infinitely more enjoyable experience when there's not as much content to try and blast through in a given time frame. I've already kind of touched on how my content is going to change going forward, you know, regarding guides, the facts that rotations and builds will be a starting point instead of a, hey, here is how you build and play the character, this is chiseled in stone. One, none of my guides have ever been chiseled in stone because I don't like trying to put a stamp on something and say, yep, I solved the character, because I'm just one moron on the internet making PGR content. I'm not gonna be the guy that suddenly is like, well, I cracked the code in 1 week on the test server, and here you go, the character's solved, go forth and conquer the leaderboards. Like, that's the most unrealistic, nonsensical outlook you could have in being a guide maker. But I also think that being able to focus on foundation and conceptual aspects of new characters as opposed to here is how you optimize it frame one is going to be a big net positives for multiple reasons. The biggest for me being it's going to encourage players and the community writ large to do more research and share more information. I think it's really, really easy, especially in the gacha game world, to go find a guide, look at it, memorize a rotation, and discard everything beyond that. And I absolutely understand that mindset. A lot of people who play gacha games simply don't have a lot of free time to put into a gacha game at that level, to sit and do research, to do testing, to try and hyper optimize every little thing in the game. That's not for everyone, and a lot of people simply don't have time for it. But I personally am really looking forward to having my guides and the testing that goes into them, the research that goes into them, be groundwork for how a character grows and how their build efficiency starts to adapt, how their gameplay optimizations will arrive with months and months of time and effort. I just think that's going to be a way more interesting way to write guides, and it's going to be somewhat freeing as well, because now I don't have to sit and be petrified that did I get everything right? Does this rotation live up to snuff? Am I steering everyone in the wrong direction because I overlooked a potential memory build, or because I didn't realize this weird quirk about how a character's skill works, or how a certain orb works, or stuff like that? It's just going to be a lot easier to write guides to help people learn a character from the ground up, and not just here is how you do your Warzone rotation so you can stay in Legend every week. I just think that's going to be a more healthy format and a better way to make guides going forward, especially because I will have more time between new characters and new S ranks to really think about what I want to do with each guide and try and make sure that they all have worthwhile information, but hopefully some more fun and interesting stuff to do now that I'm not trying to hammer out 2 character guides a patch, 4 character guides in a 3-month span, stuff like that. I think that's going to be really nice. I also think it's going to help separate the content creators who do put extra effort into the testing and the research from the content creators who just want to X-copy a rotation, slap a little bit of editing on it, and call it a day. That works for some content creators, and this is not me throwing shade. Whatever people want to do, that's frankly none of my business. I'm not here to tell anyone how to make their PGR content, but I personally think if you're going to do character guides specifically, you should want to do the work. You should want to learn how a character works, not just on the optimization of a rotation, but literally from the ground up. What is this character's gameplay designed around? What are the devs trying to show us that, hey, here's what you can do. Now we're leaving it in your hands to expand on it, to find how to optimize it. How deep does the rabbit hole go? Can you find a completely nonsensical rotation that no one would have thought of because you decided to cut short two other characters' rotation on the team? There's so many variables that can happen, and I think that should be a challenge you want as a guide maker. I think that's something you should want to embrace and want to put effort into. But again, I'm not here to tell people how to make stuff. That's just my personal philosophy on, if you're a guide maker, you should want that burden on you. You should want to have to learn and research and do testing. But moving on to some other things. I know a lot of people have voiced some concern that we don't have foresight anymore in terms of what characters are coming out, when they're coming out, and that's a big loss for the global community writ large. And as someone who started playing gacha games with Fate Go, trust me, I get it. I understand that concern, and it is not a invalid concern to have. But with Punishing Graven, I don't think it's a huge issue. I really don't. PGR has one of the most fair and transparent gacha systems of any gacha game I've played. If you're just doing your dailies, weeklies, and event modes, you know without fail, you're going to get enough pull currency to get the new S rank when it comes out. You're just going to be able to do that. Maybe you can't afford the cub. Maybe you can't get the weapon right away. But when a new character comes out and they're on 100% rate up, aka the best time to pull a character, as long as you're playing the game regularly and doing your daily, weekly modes, you're going to have enough to get that. You will have enough to get a copy of the character, and then eventually you will have enough to take that character to double S with Pain Cage shards. It's very, very straightforward. It's very transparent. And so for me, for my salt, I just don't think that FOMO is that big of a deal in PGR. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. We do get things like the gacha codings, and you never know when one of those is going to pop up. You never know when one of those is going to pop up for your absolute favorite character in the game that you started playing the game for. And there is that aspect. Not knowing that's coming can be a jump scare, and it could cause some FOMO. I'm not going to pretend that's not a thing. But I don't think being worried that we no longer have the foresight of what characters and what content is coming is a bad thing. I don't think that's going to be an issue, and I don't think, panicking about it is really something you should do. PGR is a fair game, in my opinion. It is a very fair and very balanced gacha game when it comes to obtaining new characters, and when we're on a normal schedule, it is going to be very, very rare that you ever go and get a new paid S rank by rolling on them and then have to turn around the very next patch and get another paid S rank. That usually only happened once, maybe twice a year at most prior to the Global Synchronization program. So if you're worried about the lack of foresight, I'm here to tell you that you can probably relax a little bit. It's really not going to be as scary and as big of a deal as it might seem at first blush. Beyond all of this, though, I'm mostly excited because it means I personally will get to do some more fun and interesting videos on topics that I simply haven't had time to work on during the Global Synchronization program. I want to do some fun stuff like maybe dabble in some top 10, top 5 lists for certain topics. I want to be able to make videos on predictions on future content, future characters. And of course, as I mentioned, I want to start making lore content for this game. And I think, in general, PGR is set up to do even more amazing things in 2026. And me personally, I am very thankful that the overall crunch of the Global Sync is on its way out. I think it lasted just long enough to not overstay its welcome. But I'm very glad we're going to be back on a normal schedule where I can dedicate more time of a given patch to just making a video because the idea popped in my head, or making a video that I've had an idea to do for months, but there just hasn't been enough of a window where I have enough drive to get to scripting and writing and recording and editing something in addition to the things that need to come out. For me, the way my channel has built up and the way you all have shown massive support, I need to reiterate that I have gained nearly 3,000 subscribers since this program started. And in big boy YouTube numbers, that doesn't mean anything at all. And even in little tiny channel numbers. 3,000 subscribers isn't the most impressive thing in the world, but my channel was at barely 5K when this started. That means I have gained literally 60% of my original subscriber base in less than a year. And I've had my YouTube channel for a long time. It hasn't always been very active for the time I've had it, but, you know, semantics. So the fact that I've been able to grow this much and do it basically on the backbone of videos that last way too long. This one included, by the way, as I look over at OBS and see 49 minutes, 50 minutes exactly. God, I need to learn how to shut up. Basically what I'm saying is now I'll actually have time and drive to do things that I want to do in addition to the stuff that you all expect on this channel in terms of character guides, elemental effect guides, information for newer players on specific game modes, or if you should utilize a paid banner with 100% rate up, or who your S rank selector should go to. My channel is definitely based first and foremost on raw information. It's what I'm good at. I'm an analytical person. It's how I do fighting game commentary. I am very much a person that likes to teach you the thing, teach you about the stuff. And that has worked very well, clearly. This channel's only grown, and for some reason, a lot of you like listening to my dumbass voice for way too long at a time, and I can't thank you all enough for that. So, but I'm excited to be able to do some new stuff. I'm excited to just do some stuff that's going to be wadding up a spitball thrown into the wall and seeing what sticks, and seeing what people like and maybe what people don't want to see on the channel, because you know, I want to do stuff that I want to do, but I also want to try and incorporate stuff that other people want to see. At the end of the day, PGR is still a very niche gacha game. This is not a Hoyoverse game. This is not Wuwa. This is not any of the gacha, you know, titans out there that are just completely inundated with mass amounts of content creators backing them at all times. There really aren't that many PGR content creators, especially in the global space. So I want to try and do stuff that this community is hungry for, in addition to the stuff I want to do. The stuff that people, you know, want to see more of on various content creators' channel, but just aren't happening. Again, the only reason I even decided I would try and make a concerted effort into rereading this whole story and getting into lore content is I've had a lot of people come to this channel and talk about how starved they are for good lore content, or even any lore content for that matter, because there's so few channels doing it right now. So I think the end of the Global Sync is the perfect time to expand upon that and hopefully expand my own horizons, and hopefully you all to expand your horizons when it comes to punishing Grey Raven, because now we'll have some actual time to do those things. And I think that is just going to be a massive net positive. But I've rambled on this enough. The TLDR, if you want to know what it is, I think the Global Sync was a massive success. I think it was implemented about as well as it could have been. There have been some downsides. There have been some pitfalls, but none of them remotely derailed or undo the sheer amount of good that this program has done for punishing Grey Raven as a whole. And I think we'll look back on 2025 as a massive success and a massive turning point for this game in terms of its overall broad appeal and for its ability to bring in new players. Because if you think the Global Sync and Devil May Cry didn't drastically increase the player base of this game, I encourage you to go check out some numbers. You will be shocked. You will be utterly stunned how successful this program was in terms of growing Punishing Grey Raven as a globally recognized game. But I want to know how y'all feel. How have you felt going through the Global Synchronization? Was this handled the way you wanted it to be handled if you're a longtime player? If you're one of the new players who have come in with this program, are you excited that we're totally synced up and that we're going to go to a normal schedule? What are you hoping for Punishing Grey Raven in 2026 and beyond? What are you excited for? Who are you hoping to see get new frames? All that kind of fun stuff. So let me know down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious if other people think I'm crazy for considering this a success, if some people think this was just the worst thing ever. I genuinely am curious what you all think. But I have yapped far too long yet again because that's the only thing I'm actually good at. Spoilers. So I'm going to close this one up, and I will be back soon with plenty more content as soon as I get test server access for Live. That process will be immediately the forefront of what I'll be doing in terms of planning the next video and planning the next guide. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy kind of playing PGR and getting back to a normal pace because, boy, am I ready for it. So, as always, I appreciate y'all's feedback, support. You want to do the YouTube garbage, like, comment, subscribe. It's always appreciated. It's never necessary. But I'm going to get out of here. And to be perfectly honest, I'm probably going to go play more Night Rain because I just picked that game up 2 weeks ago. And that's digital crack. And my pipe be empty. So, y'all be good to each other. Take care. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.